All right, guys, here we go. You ready?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining the webinar. My name's Kevin Vogel. I'm the Vice President of Virtualization and Cloud Computing here at Champion Solutions Group. And we're going to be looking at new innovations from Carbon Black and Varonis today. And we're lucky enough to have Matt Farr from Varonis with us. Matt, are you there?
I'm here, Kevin. Thank you.
Okay, and we also have Tristan Morris with Carbon Black, who's going to be presenting on Carbon Black. Tristan, are you there?
I am here, and it's a pleasure to be here with everyone today.
Well, it's really nice of you to join us today. I think we're going to have a great session, and we'll be able to kick things off here. I just want to give you a quick background on Champion Solutions Group, why we're holding this, and as you can see, we have 5 practices that we, in fact, mine is not bent. You should be able to see my screen now. I hit the wrong button. As you can see, we have 5 practices that we really concentrate on here at Champion. Data center services like flash storage and networking. Converged and hyper-converged architecture is starting to be a big part of what our customers are asking us for. And then my area of expertise, this is really good, is cloud and virtualization. We are the largest Office 365 partner in the country. We also do a lot with hybrid clouds and private clouds, cloud storage, pretty much anything that you want to do in the cloud. And then also from a virtualization standpoint, whether it be servers or storage or applications, we kind of do all of that and have been doing it for, I've been with Champion 20 years. We've been doing most of that for 20 years. And then really where we're focused today is on the security side. I think you'll see from both Carbon Black and Varonis how they have a unique area of expertise that can help you secure your data, help you secure your environment. And as you can see, we do things like security awareness training and application security. Endpoint, obviously, Carbon Black's going to be touching on that. And then data wire security and all the different things that you see out there. Our heritage is in data management. We've been a large storage reseller and data management partner for a very long time. We represent most of the large data management companies out there. And our focus is helping customers utilize not only their on-premise, but also their cloud storage and how we can help you now archive to the cloud and start using the resources that are available to you. And then obviously our creme de la creme is our professional services and consulting. This is really where we help our customers the most, from anything from system and software integration all the way through doing things like VDI implementations and consulting. That has been of late a really big focus area for us. It seems like it's back in vogue. But those are the areas that we work on. We're going to start off today with Matt Farr from Varonis and let him introduce what Varonis does and how well they do it. But I do have just a couple of housekeeping things here that you're going to see. First of all, in the interface that you have there, you'll have a questions box. So we would love to have this be interactive. We'd love to have you ask questions during it to Matt or Tristan or myself, and we'll try to answer them as we go. And we have 2 poll questions from each of our participants, Varonis and Carbon Black, and we're just asking you to answer just 2 poll questions from each one of the presenters today. This way they can make sure that they tailor the presentation to exactly what you guys are doing. I'm going to do the first poll question here, and as you can see, I'm going to launch it for you. If you could just answer any of the questions. How do you detect insiders looking at your information? If you could just answer the question there on your screen, that'd be great. Looks like so far network monitoring applications is one of the big things, and right now they have no tools that they're using. So it looks like most of the people, 67% of the people out there, are using some type of network monitoring applications, and the other 33% of them don't have any tool in there as we see. So I'm going to close that one and just do the second poll question that we have here. And that one is, when was the last time you did an assessment? And if you could just answer that for me real quick here. Right now, 1 year looks like to be the most popular one out there as we go here. And it looks like 6 months and never also is getting some play out there. Thank you very much for that. This way we can make sure we tailor it to what Matt's going to be presenting. So Matt, if you will take it away, let people know how Varonis is going to help them.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it very much. Interesting information, you guys. I appreciate participation there. We're going to take a little bit of a different approach today, and it's not going to be heavily product-focused so much, even though I'd be willing to answer any product questions, obviously. But really just talk about the pain point that's at hand, and that's the insider threat. And I mean, if you guys have seen through news, publications of all sorts, we see that every organization, big, small, regardless of your vertical, they're all dealing with this challenge. Yeah, you can go ahead, Kevin. And the agenda really is to have some thoughts around ransomware, and you're probably thinking to yourself, well, is that really an insider threat? And it's a good thought, right? We'll talk a little bit about why we included that in this presentation, and then we'll look at some more examples of traditional classes of insider threat and how Varonis obviously can help, and why we're doing this today with Carbon Black and really giving you that end-to-end detection and remediation effort around this. So Kevin, if you want to go on, really before we dive all the way in, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Varonis. The origin story of Varonis is an interesting one. Our CEO, our founders basically were NetApp engineers, and they essentially were called in by a big oil and gas company that were storing high-res images of the ocean floor on NetApp, and one day these images disappeared, and they really had no visibility into how this happened. Was it a mistake? Was it malicious? Was there a problem? And really, so our CEO and actually CTO were called in to assess this situation and to find out what happened to this information and could they get it back. And it really that was quite a long time ago. We've come a long way since then, but at that point in time it really triggered a light bulb that, hey, we need to be able to do this. We got a lot of data out there. Data's growing. People have got their hands in it, and we need to be able to track it or audit it properly. And that really was the birth of Varonis, and they developed the initial product to do just that, really give you visibility into your data and the ability to govern your data properly. If you move on there, Kevin, we think about some of the the breaches, right, that we hear on an ongoing basis. And this is a picture of that Hollywood Presbyterian Medical Center that was breached. They were infected with malware. The files were encrypted. Hospital couldn't read the files. Typical case, right? If you think about what this means for a hospital, making it impossible for them to read files, it was a serious situation, right? They were diverting patients because they didn't have the ability to process them. It was really impacting their day-to-day patient care. So this is a severe impact, something that may seem as an everyday occurrence, but this was very severe for this hospital. I think what the most bizarre thing about this was the ransom that was basically being asked for in this situation was $17,000, and this just seems ridiculous, right? So, I mean, it's a lot of money to most, right? But for this hospital, if you think about the sort of impact it was making, this ransomware, 17,000 kind of makes you wonder. And Kevin, if you want to keep going there on the slide deck, what is that hospital's data really worth, right? What are the services worth that they were providing, and how, and is it really even worth, not paying this $17,000 fine and move on? And you look at some of the costs, right, associated with this. So this is basically a chart. It's the hospital's schedule of costs, Goes back to 2012 when they were hit, right? I'd like to draw your attention, Kevin, if you click one more time, I think it's going to highlight a line there. Look at this CT scan line. So let's just take one of their line items here. This the charges for the CT scan, over $41 million. That's $113,000 a day. So what's a $17,000 ransom, right? Just absolutely worth it, right? $17,000 is a good value to get your data back if you're losing $100-something thousand a day, right? So for organizations that have large revenues, the ROI of just paying this ransom and burying it is extremely good. But ransomware is not indiscriminate, right? It doesn't care if you're a hospital, you're a bank, or whatever the case may be. It's a numbers game to them. They figure if they can send out X amount of these phishing attacks or however it is they're trying to get in, they get a certain percentage back, they're good, right? It's all a numbers game. This is a stunning figure from Kevin Beaumont, who's a malware analyst. That, he's seeing about 14,000 infections an hour, or 100,000 new infections per day. If you do the math, you only need a very small percentage of these victims to bite on this to really make a lot of money. And so, if you look at Google Trends, yeah, thanks, Kevin. You really see this huge spike in searches for ransomware, and when the Locky variant went wild, there really hasn't been a drop-off since then. So it's really just a booming, unfortunately, a booming industry that's well-funded, and they're getting more and more sophisticated. If you look at the next slide there, because ransomware is delivered so indiscriminately, right? We see all sorts of organizations that are impacted. The headlines are kind of staggering, right? You see it everywhere from schools, churches, police departments, hospitals, obviously, really anywhere and anything. And it's all just that numbers game, like I said. So why is it so dangerous? And what does this have to do with what we're talking about, right? Well, if you think about it, once it's delivered, right, it behaves like an insider. Once you click on that attachment, or you go to that malicious website, or you bite on that phishing attack, you're vulnerable, right? And it executes within your environment. It utilizes the user rights, and it effectively starts, in a noisy way, affecting your data, right? So we kind of were thinking about it. It's really a noisy class of insider threat, right? It's once it's in, it's acting kind of like an insider threat, except that it's saying, hey, I'm here. I want you to know I'm here because I want you to pay this ransom in order to get your data back. So, and a lot of folks have asked me, Matt, well, if people just stop paying the ransom, it'll stop, right? Not really, because you look at the value. You look at what that hospital went through. That's really the reason why it's so successful. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this story, but if you think about just paying that ransom, what is the effect of that? Well, in that hospital's case, we're not sure, but we heard stories of corporate entities, big retail entities that have been hit with ransomware. They almost paid this small ransom. But in reality, once they got the FBI involved and they traced this back, it ended up being a very severe threat. It was a terrorist entity that was looking or trying to get information from these organizations on folks that they're tracking. So, we like to look at it, sometimes we look at it on the surface as just a nuisance, but in the reality, it's becoming a very serious matter. So if we look at these statistics here, why is it so dangerous? 62% of the users say that access to company data they probably shouldn't see. That's staggering, right? 62% of people within organizations have too much access. 29% of IT respondents say that the companies fully enforce or a strict least privilege model. That's too low, right? Every organization should be enforcing the least privilege model. And at Varonis, we really have a philosophy that it starts at that level, right? If you're not protecting the data at the most basic foundational level of securing it and putting in that least privilege model, you're opening yourself up to a variety of risks. Look at the ransomware as just one, right? If a user had limited access based on only what they needed access to, the ransomware could cause a very limited amount of damage. But because organizations, as you see there, 62%, have too much access for too many folks, ransomware causes extremely large amounts of damage because they have access to too much data. So there is a foundational aspect of this that Varonis helps you with, and that is, let's get to a least privilege model. Let's secure our data to begin with and do it properly, and that eliminates an enormous amount of risk right off the bat. If you look at this here, what makes matters worse, you look, 35% of organizations have no searchable records of file system activities. So they're not auditing, so that makes matters worse. So first of all, they're overprivileged. They don't have visibility into activity. They don't have visibility into email activity. There is another area of concern, right? So imagine you've got a bank vault that any employee could basically walk into, start grabbing a bunch of money without any cameras or ledgers or any kind of record of what would happen. So this is a massive risk, right? When you're not restricting access and you're not monitoring access, how do you protect yourself, right? So this is, to lead into this, what has really changed here? Kevin, if you look at this, because we've been auditing, Windows is at auditing, right? You might all be chuckling under your breath right now. But the bottom line is this has changed things, right? Bitcoin. It's so easy, easier than ever, and ubiquitous to play this role and to, monetize it, right? We can now send this stuff out in mass scale, play that numbers game, and all, and digitally, be compensated for it. The invent of the Bitcoin really allows an attacker from anywhere in the world to just make boatloads of cash by exploiting vulnerabilities that, as we're seeing, most organizations have. So what does this mean? Let's take a look. So there's a variety of different types of more traditional insider threats, right? And we brought up the ransomware because, one, it's a huge pain point, and it's one that Varonis is really focused on addressing. And I'm sure Carbon Black will speak to that as well. You really need that end-to-end protection. And the other part of that is why we brought it up is because it's a noisy variant of insider threat, right? It's inside. It's doing things on the inside like a typical insider would, but it's saying, hey, I'm here. Well, what about the folks that don't tell you they're there, right? The folks that have access to your data. They're supposed to be working within your environment, but they, at the same time, they don't want you to know what's going on. This is the hardest type of I would say, attack to detect, right? There's some characters in this, and I'm going to run through a couple of these. So the canary in the coal mine, right? Malware Molly. So that's what we're talking about. Ransomware, it's noisy. She opens an attachment, she installs, or she goes to a browser, she gets nailed, she's infected, it starts ripping through her data. But the bottom line is it's noisy. It tells you you're there. Hey, it's the canary in the coal mine, right? But what about the other insider threats, Kevin, if you want to move on? What are the other players in this that are, even more dangerous, right? Look at this guy here. So this is your disgruntled guy. He's an employee. Maybe he just got a bad review. He's just unhappy. Dan's going to put in his 2 weeks. He's going to resign. So he thinks he has the right to take everything he's ever worked on and take it with him. And believe me, 50% of people that have been interviewed say that they think everything they've ever worked on for an organization belongs to them, and they can take it with them. And then that's really not the fact. That's not the case. So stay right there for a second, Kevin. So disgruntled Dan, will his access be revoked immediately, or will he still have access, right, and within this 2-week notice? Well, let's look at a real-world example of this. All right, so you moved on. So look at this guy here. This guy's name is Greg Chung. I don't know how many of you guys have heard of this guy. He worked at Boeing for 30 years. He stole $2 billion worth of sensitive information and sold it to China. When the FBI caught this guy, there was 250,000 pieces of sensitive aerospace documents buried underneath this guy's house. He went to trial. I think initially the judge wanted him to serve 16 years, but I think he only got a few years when all was said and done. He was able to steal, though, and exfiltrate data for 30 years undetected. So this is a classic and scary example, right? If you don't have a way to gain visibility into how your users are behaving, how they're accessing the data, what they're doing with the data, there's no way to determine then what is abnormal, right? There's no way to know when Greg Chung here starts pulling information that he shouldn't really be messing with, right? If you don't know his normal work pattern and what he's supposed to be accessing. If you look at the next slide, you've got another example of this. This is abusive Andy, right? So this is a guy, he's got elevated privileges. He understands how the network works. He knows how everyone behaves and where they have access and don't have access. So he basically knows the inner workings of the environment, right? And they have a lot of power, admins. But it's important to know if your admins are using their power for good or evil, right? So here's another example of this if you go to the next slide there, Kevin. This admin here, this is a real story. Retiring sysadmin fakes cyber attack to get away with data theft. How about this one, right? He basically decided, hey, I'm going to go retire. I'm going to use my elevated access, start gathering up sensitive corporate data, and when I get an offer that I can't refuse, I'm going to sell it. Well, he was caught, so he never got his beach house. But this is a perfect example of using that power and abusing it. And look at the quote on the side there. He's getting near retirement. The admin received an offer to sell corporate data, and he took it, right? He was looking at retiring down. And so these are real stories and real-life examples of the real, insider threat. Look at the next one there, Kevin. Citibank. There's an admin at Citibank thought he was going to get fired after a performance review. So he basically maliciously changed the router config and took 90% of the firm's network down. It's incredible, right? Sent a text message to his colleague saying, wow, is it on this quote? No. But he basically said it's staggering how much havoc one angry sysadmin can cause, right? Just incredible stuff, and real. And just more of the reason why in these examples that we absolutely have to protect ourselves from this type of behavior. Just a couple more here, Kevin. If you go, he hijacked Hillary. She's typically someone whose identity has been hijacked by another human, typically an outsider. We do hear examples of people selling their credentials now, which is scary. So she's similar to the malware gal, right? Malware Molly, except that this gal gets her credentials hijacked, and then they can use those credentials to move around. If you look at the next slide there, this is what's greeted the folks at Sony Pictures when they arrived at work, in 2014. So they had this running inside the organization, and the actual insider somewhere in here, had basically been the proxy for the attack. And I believe at this point now we believe is North Korea. So, scary stuff, but real, and we're seeing it all over the place. If you look at this next slide, it's easier and easier now for malicious folks to gain access like this. This is staggering, right? What you're basically looking at here is you can rent time now in internal servers within, in some cases, Fortune 500 companies. So this report basically says that you can go on this site and you can order a server, such as an example here where, there's basically an example where one of Cisco's Windows servers was up for sale for a few bucks an hour or something like that. And Cisco actually did confirm that it was indeed a real server within their network. It was a bad lab machine or something that had RDP opened up, and they had gotten access to this server and they were releasing time on it. So this is kind of staggering, right? So you actually can go on. You don't even have to hack in anymore. You can go if someone's already done the work for you. You can go and lease this on the underground cybercrime, whatever you would, dark web, whatever you want to call it, and gain access to this sort of thing. So this is just incredible. So what does all this mean to us? Well, there's a script to this, right? They get inside, they snoop around, they exfiltrate data. It's the bottom line. Some of you are familiar with the Lockheed Martin kill chain, right? Getting in, moving laterally, trying to find access points, and then exfiltrating data. This example here is at the bottom. It kind of indicates that it doesn't take it's not rocket science. I mean, obviously some are more sophisticated than others, but you're looking at basically a PowerShell one-liner that uses a command to go out and look for credit card data. So you can use the native tools to search, once you're in very effectively. If you look at this next slide here, this is hilarious. So a lot of times users they're their biggest enemy, right? Look at this. This gal posts her new credit card. I'm so excited. I got a new credit card. Look at this. Thank you very much. Now please just turn it around so I can see that little number and I'm good to go, right? Or you look on the right-hand side here, basically, folks snooping around for, misconfigured websites where they have plain text passwords. These are entry points. But what is the most vulnerable data? And if you look going on here, the most vulnerable data is the data that we use every day. It's the data that sits in the file servers. It's the email data. A lot of you use SharePoint, and that data is growing 800% over the next 5 years, and 80% of it is still going to be unstructured. Microsoft came out with the statistics, and I don't remember the exact number, but it was basically by the year 2020 or 2022, everyone is going to have generated terabytes of individual data. That's pretty incredible, right? So this data is growing at an alarming rate, and this threat isn't going away. But what can we do? And this is our focus here at Varonis, right? We have to get better. And we have to get better first and foremost at detection. We have to have the tools in place to where instead of detecting this stuff when it's too late, we're detecting it at its origin, and we're able to essentially act on it immediately. This comes from a Verizon statistic here, a data breach statistic. And you can see that basically most organizations, it takes them months to detect any sort of insider threat. There's actually a pretty high percentage of folks that are still not detecting it for years. Look at the case of Boeing. We also do a presentation on the Office of Personnel Management breach, and that breach went on for years. So we have to get better at detecting these threats. But how can we get better? So if we look at this, there's a methodology that Varonis has that we feel like is technology agnostic, to be honest with you. It does involve, though, a process. And we believe that, with partners like Champion, with like Carbon Black, and ourselves, we can effectively take organizations through this process to detect when you have issues of this sort, prevent them, and sustain that protection going forward. We detect by analyzing data. We're going to analyze that data and provide you statistics on an ongoing basis. We're going to allow you the visibility to understand how your data is being utilized, who's using it, how are they using it. We're going to profile that usage so that we can detect when things get abnormal, right? We're going to know if Matt normally is in sales and accesses these 3 folders every day, suddenly starts snooping around in HR and legal, that's not right, and we should know about that, right? And then we're going to prevent it. We have to prevent it by locking down, we have to start at the foundation by locking down access, preventing that overprivileged access, identifying data that is sitting out there that is sensitive, that is stale, reducing that broad access immediately, and simplifying how access works so that the right people have the right access to the data to begin with. That's an enormous risk reduction in itself. And then long term, you have to have solutions in place to sustain that. A lot of you said in that survey, it's about once a year that you do some sort of risk assessment on your environment. And we've had so many customers that, we've had conversations like that. Yeah, we did a manual, assessment. We had some folks, business leaders fill out some forms on what data they have access to. We did that like a year ago, and then we'll come in and do our assessment, and the environment is a complete disaster because that's not sustainable. And people make mistakes, and a lot of folks within organizations, they don't even know what data they really have access to. So questioning them in a manual process is not sustainable. Or you're using point solutions to try to gather this information. And without the context around how this data is utilized and what is that data, it's really, again, not sustainable. So you have to have the solution in place that can, on an ongoing basis, maintain this through automation, through automated entitlement reviews, where data owners are actually on an ongoing basis seeing who has access to their data, driving recommendations on what folks should not have access to their data based on usage, and then being able to act on that. So there are 6 mitigation tips that I want to share with you guys. that we feel like are part of our methodology. One is eliminate global access. Folks that have permission creep over time, global access groups like domain users, everyone, these should be eliminated. These should be used sparingly, and we really want to get to a best practice of creating the appropriate group memberships with the appropriate users and having that inheritance flow down appropriately. Secondly, we want to eliminate excessive permissions. When you have folks that have moved from let's say department to department, they always come banging on your door for access, right? They never come banging on your door to remove access, right? So what happens is people change, organizations go through changes, maybe acquisitions, mergers, things of that nature. We go through permission creep, where we have leftover permissions, folks that still have access to data that they don't need access to anymore. So let's find that, and let's eliminate that excessive permission and remediate it. Thirdly is you need to be able to alert on privilege escalations. What does this mean? Well, just like we saw with the abusive admin, right? If you've got a group that has, privileged access, you better be monitoring them and understand what they're doing with that access. And if there are changes to that, you also should know about it, right? So there should not be abusive changes to accounts that have privileged access. Those accounts shouldn't be used for accessing data they shouldn't. And the same way you would monitor normal user activity, you've got to monitor that as well. The fourth thing here is you have to alert on behavioral deviations. Gartner came out and said that if Snowden, in this case of Edward Snowden, if they had behavioral analytics, Snowden would have been caught. And this is a huge focus for Varonis. We're gathering data from a variety of different aspects. We're gathering data off, who has access to what. We're gathering data in regard to where is your sensitive data. We're also gathering data on group membership, who's a member of what. We're gathering data now from various platforms, AD, storage platforms, Exchange, SharePoint. We're gathering all this information, and then we're utilizing algorithms in the back end to perform analytics and build out profiles on how users work on a day-to-day basis. Based on that, if there are deviations in that activity, you can be alerted on it. So if there's a cumulative, access, increases where a certain individual starts pulling data from a folder they never access, that's going to be an alert. If someone starts changing group policy in a rapid manner, that's going to trigger an alert. If someone goes in and takes an admin group and starts adding members to it, that's going to trigger an alert. If you have a situation with ransomware where a gal goes to order lunch and she clicks a link and she gets infected and starts ripping through your shares, you're going to receive an alert immediately. These are all deviations in the norm that you need to know about and be proactive in protecting yourself. And let's take a look, here in summary that it's the honeypots, right? Protect yourself. Find out who your most risky users are, right? Put some stuff out there and try to attract them and see who hits it, and then you can mark them as high-risk users. And then you want to closely monitor those people, right? Maybe it's someone who's given their resignation. Maybe it's someone that came from a competitor. Maybe it's someone that you have set up a honeypot and they took the bait. You need to closely monitor these people, mark them as high-risk users, and be able to understand what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. So in summary here, ransomware is an epidemic. It's not going away. You need a way to protect yourself from this. We have to change our focus from trying to just build bigger moats with firewalls and so forth. And a lot of you said you're running network detection tools. Well, some of these huge breaches you hear about, they had network protection tools. They had fancy firewalls. They're becoming more and more sophisticated. They're finding ways around it. We have a very data-centric approach to how we protect you. We protect you from the data back. It's the data they're after. Why wouldn't you want to understand the data and understand how the data is being accessed? Why try to sort through millions of network events to try to understand this? Let's look at the data itself. Let's profile it. Let's understand exactly what is abnormal. The assets at risk tend to be unstructured data, right? And the biggest breaches are all about files, emails, and the stuff that makes up 80% of an organization, right? So our approach, detect, prevent, and sustain. Our methodology, it's tested, And we love to take organizations through this with our risk assessment. So if you're interested in this, this is a free risk assessment. We do this for the majority of our customers. It's the first step for them. We come in, we take a scope of their data, and we take them through that methodology. You know, detect, prevent, and sustain. And we prove out how we do that with the data that is most important to them. Drives you some great insights, some great visibility into their how their users are behaving, what their data looks like, where they have risk exposure. So as you see here, if you'd like to take down that bit.ly link, you know, of course, any of us here from Varonis would be more than happy to speak with you about that. And I want to kind of segue this over also to Tristan, because a lot of times we're asked, well, I love Varonis for what it's doing. You know, it's looking at my centralized data. It's doing UBA. It's really driving these key insights. You know, how do I take this from end to end? How do I take this from, you know, the central core of my data all the way to the endpoint, right? And that's really why we're doing this with Carbon Black, because you know, that layered approach is key. And you know, with the combination of these solutions that I'm sure Tristan's going to speak to, you can accomplish that. So thank you very much. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Champion. And thanks, Carbon Black.
And thank you, Matt. And you can also contact your Champion rep. We do a lot of these assessments like Matt was talking about for customers. And, you know, it really gives them insight into their data that they've never had before. And like Matt said, 80% of your data is in unstructured file shares, you know, PDFs and Word documents and Excel spreadsheets and, you know, things that people create every day. And the one thing we know is that things are going to change all the time, and that's where, you know, Varonis and their product does the monitoring after you get the analysis. Now you got to keep up with it. You got to make sure that, you know, things that change are the way that you want them to change going forward. So thanks, Matt. I really do appreciate that. And with that, now we have Tristan Morris, and Tristan is going to talk about streaming prevention and how Carbon Black is going to help you take care of that. So Tristan, take it away.
Thanks so much. Hey, everyone. Thanks for sticking on the call so far. Thanks, Matt, for going over what Varonis can offer as far as protecting files and doing that data. And really, when we look at this, what we're going to see here as I go through Carbon Black Defense, which is the product that we'll be talking about today from Carbon Black's side, is how those approaches are very similar, but handling different types of data. So to give you a little bit of background real quickly on Carbon Black as a company, we've been around for about 15 years. We started as a product called Bit9. We were really focused on locking down an endpoint and ensuring that only trusted change, only trusted execution took place. Over the years, we've evolved to keep up with the growing threat landscape. And so what we've done is we've come through and seen this next-generation antivirus market that's been emerging. People need to move beyond traditional antivirus on their machines to ensure that they're being protected against the advanced attacks that are out there. And that's what we're going to cover today. So we can go ahead and flip to the next slide there. So what we're looking at right here is a breakdown of how traditional AV works. It's what we call point-in-time prevention. Now, this is taking a look at a file or at an executable and saying, hey, do I know if this is bad already? You're comparing it to a DAT file. You're comparing it to a machine learning algorithm and saying, can I identify this as bad? Now, what's important here is you'll notice that statistic at the very bottom of the screen, 47% malware attacks. This is actually coming from last year's Verizon data breach report. What they identified was that 47% of successful breaches took place through traditional malware. That means 47% of attacks that are based in malware bypassed anti-malware tools. But what we see coming through this is that there's 53% of attacks that aren't accounted for, if we can go ahead and click over once. And that's where we come in with streaming prevention. Now, these 53% of attacks that the Verizon data breach report identified are what is called non-malware attacks. These are the ideas of going in and saying, hey, exactly what is happening with the products that are already in my environment. And if we look at those poll questions, if we could put those up really quickly, if we could go with the first one. What we're looking at here is how do you detect and stop an attack in your environment right now that's going to utilize applications and tools that are already existing in your environment, right? This is not a new piece of malware. This is something brand new, or not something brand new. This is something that just exists right now in your environment. How would you guys go through and be able to stop that type of attack? So it looks like right now what we've got is kind of a breakdown in the environment. We've got about 30% of people saying that we've got tools to go in and monitor and stop attacks that are utilizing these things. But the majority of people are looking at almost a 50-50 split now, saying we don't have the ability to go in and monitor this type of event. So if we could take a look at that really quickly, that staggering type of statistic there, 53% of attacks are going to occur through non-malware. They're already leveraging what you have in your environment. If we go ahead and take a look at that second attack, or that second question, is how do you respond to and remediate an attack that is already occurring or has occurred in your environment? So if you guys take a look at this and go ahead and answer what we've got here. So it looks like we've got, again, right now, about a 50-50 split. Now we're right down the board on 33 and 33 and 33. Dedicated incident response team, or we look at the logs and clean the machine, or we wipe and re-image it and put the machine back out there. Well, what we identified is that first and foremost, you have to be able to go in and see that these attacks are occurring. So we start with streaming prevention. We still take a point-in-time prevention model. We can block a known bad file before it ever has the chance to execute. But for anything new that comes in, brand new, unknown, unidentifiable malware, or things that are living off your environment, we use streaming prevention, which starts at a baseline of visibility. Record absolutely everything that's going on. Feed that through an analysis engine to determine what actions are being taken by these programs in your environment, and predict when an attack is coming so that we can step in and stop it before it actually gains access to the level of a breach. So why don't we go to the next slide here for me. And this is how streaming prevention works. We start with a real-time sensor. It's recording everything. We tag all of the events that are occurring on your endpoint and push that through the attack analysis to run the risk profile. A risk profile is saying, what is this action and how far would this allow someone to go in my environment? It's very similar to what Varonis does in protecting your files right now. It's saying who has access to these files and what can they do with it. We're going in and looking at the programs themselves so that someone who does have access to your sensitive data doesn't get utilized and exploited when someone gets into their machine. And we drive all this through our enforcement engine. So let's take a look at my last slide here. This is where we come in with streaming prevention in action. So what you can see right here is a really quick breakdown, a model of a malwareless attack. Firefox, Flash, and PowerShell. These are trusted applications in your environment. Now, what we do is we continuously monitor and record what's happening through these applications. We see that Firefox is a browser, active client, accessing the network. That's very low risk. This doesn't need to be something that we block in your environment because it should happen every single day. Flash comes in through Firefox, and we're recording how that happens, which IP address delivered it, which user was on the machine. It modifies a registry and runs a shell on your computer, and we elevate the risk. Now, PowerShell opens up on your computer. PowerShell should not be opened through Flash. That's not the traditional way to do it. So we're going to tag that known good application as potentially malicious, give it that fileless tag, and then when we see it suspends a process, we know that the next action that comes after that is going to lead to your breach. So at the moment this attacker attempts to inject code into that suspended process, our sensor steps in and stops that action, and then flips it to a threat and gives you great visibility into it in the console. So what we're going to do right now is we're actually going to take a look at a malwareless attack in the console for Carbon Black Defense itself. So if you could go ahead and just give me those presenter rights, and I'll start sharing my screen. Now, could someone please let me know, can you guys see what I call the big blue donut right now?
You got it. You're up and running.
All right, excellent. So this is the home screen for Carbon Black Defense. It's a cloud-based product, which means there's nothing you need to stand up in your own environment. You're going to simply deploy the sensors out to your machines. So when you deploy the sensors out, you can do that through traditional methods, SCCM, GPO. You also have an email enrollment option in the console to go through that. But they're going to immediately start the streaming prevention process on your devices. So looking at things like infection by source. I'm getting a little bit of echo if someone could mute. There we go. So when we look at the infection by source, we're assessing here, how did this come in? Was this machine on-premise or off-premise at the time that it entered? How did it get delivered? Email, web, removable media? What was actually plugged into that machine at the time that delivered this attack? Now, if I see things coming in through the web while the machine is on-premise, that means something bypassed my firewall. Because we're continuously monitoring and recording, I can now go back by clicking on this graph and take a look at which IP address delivered this specifically. How do I block this moving forward? I can also see my attack stages, a really simple life cycle breakdown, Lockheed Martin kill chain, looking at this and saying, how far along has this progressed based on its behaviors? And then finally, our threats by reputation, which is where we're handling the point-in-time prevention model, which is what makes us a full 100% direct replacement for AV in your environment right now, no matter what your compliance concerns are. So when we look at threats by reputation, we're going to look at all of the collective intelligence that we've built out over the last 15 years. Looking at all of our Facebook our partnerships with the other threat intelligence out there like Facebook, Alien Vault, National Vulnerability Database, and VirusTotal. We have direct ties into their cloud backends. So the moment any of them detect something or something gets put into their database like VirusTotal, we can immediately block it in your environment. Now, to look at streaming prevention in action, we're going to come over to our alerts. So as we talked about already, everything starts with baseline visibility. How do you detect these events? By recording everything and synthesizing that through the actions that are being taken, we can look at not only how far these events progress, but what was their severity in your environment. Known viruses that have been detected. Priority level 3, really low-level stuff here. This has already been detected. It's quarantined in place. It's never going to be allowed to execute, so I don't need to worry about it right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bump my priority score up to anything 4 or higher and immediately triage that down to just what I'm concerned with. Now I'm looking at things that ran or were blocked by Carbon Black Defense, and I can also look at monitored events, things that are just behaving strangely. Now, when we look at something like ransomware, a known piece of ransomware was detected running, so we immediately terminated it. This means that it hit the machine, we did the reputation lookup and found it, and then when someone clicked on it, we stopped it before it had the chance to execute. So this is something that tried to happen across multiple devices in my environment. Now, heaven forbid this was able to bypass security. We all know nothing is 100%. This is where the partnership between Carbon Black Defense and a product like what Varonis offers really layers itself into your environment nicely. Because if you're protecting the endpoint itself with something like Carbon Black Defense that can stop an attack before it occurs, you're fine. But if something, heaven forbid, does manage to move past that, Varonis has your back in protecting those files themselves and making sure that there's the least privilege access model so the least amount of damage occurs. But another one that we're going to look at here is down here with PowerShell. Now I can see in this threat that I have highlighted, PowerShell read memory from LSAS. Now, not everyone's going to get into this console and immediately understand by looking at LSAS what's going on here. So we tell you, this could have included credentials and password information, so we applied that terminate policy. The moment that this instance of PowerShell stepped into the realm of being a breach, we immediately shut down the action. We also have a monitored event of PowerShell executing a file, a script, or command. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to type PowerShell into my search bar and take a look at just those 2 events. Because we're going to look at this through the lens of something like Varonis as well with that least privilege access model. Now what I see right here, PowerShell executing a script or command, this could be any IT administrator on any given day. Almost everyone that I talk to in IT or security utilizes PowerShell to automate tasks and make their lives easier. So let's look at our behaviors. Well, this instance of PowerShell has network access. This is probably one of the things that flagged us and said, let's keep a close eye on this. But we didn't need to step in and take any action or stop it because it's really not doing anything that would lead to a breach. And if I look at exactly what's going on here, I can go into my investigations page and see that PowerShell is being run by Jay Ross. Well, he's one of our IT professionals, and he created a network connection over TCP. I really don't care about this. This is something that he does every single day. But the reason I brought you here to show you exactly what happened is because I want to show you how this can move beyond this into the realm of a threat. Jay Ross can utilize PowerShell to make a network connection and remote into a machine and run different things and run scripts that he utilizes every day. But what I don't want to see him doing is scraping memory out of LSAS to try and gain access to credentials that are not his. This is where we're looking at a least privilege model. He should have his credentials and his accesses and no one else's. So we see that we stepped in and blocked that. Now if I go ahead and drop this down, I can see that this also enumerated processes in my environment. It injected code, scraped from RAM, read security data. That all happened around that network access, so clearly something was going on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my investigation around this event particularly. And the first thing I want to do is make sure that this can't spread. So I'm going to go to my device info, my actions, and I'm going to quarantine the device instantly. It's going to take it away from the network so that no network connections are allowed unless they're going to Carbon Black Defense or coming from Carbon Black Defense. I lock this down. Now I can see that Jay Ross is using PowerShell and creates a network connection, but it moves well past that. He goes ahead and queries, who am I? He wants to know the exact credentials and privileges of the person that he's remoted into right now. That's pretty suspicious. So Carbon Black Defense takes this from a priority level 4 monitored event at the network connection and starts to elevate that up through the priority ranks. I can also see that he goes ahead and opens up Notepad through PowerShell. That's a very strange way to open Notepad. And in fact, this is probably leading to process hollowing. He opens it and suspends it right away to inject his own code, and that's what we see happen right here. Now, I see PowerShell attempts to inject code into the Notepad process, but immediately Carbon Black Defense steps in and blocks the action of injecting code into Notepad. It also terminates that instance of Notepad that he opened through PowerShell. We flip it to a threat and give it a priority level of 6 in your environment, so it's moving its way through the ranks. Now, I could have configured Carbon Black Defense to immediately shut down PowerShell as well, but I didn't. I didn't get that heavy-handed with this one. And so the attacker continues to leverage this. What J. Ross does is he goes ahead and he opens up LSASS and then he tries to scrape the memory out of it. He wants to gain access to all those hash values so that he can take over a higher privilege account and then spread himself across the environment. But what we see right here is that the operation, again, is blocked and then the application terminated by Carbon Black Defense. Now, if I look at that, it's got an even higher priority score in my environment. He's being persistent. He's going after deeper system-level resources. So I know this attack was stopped, but I also know exactly how severe it was. And now I need to remediate and make sure this never takes place again. So I'm probably going to go into something like Varonis, and I'm going to revoke J. Ross's privileges. I don't want him to being able to access anything at this point anymore because I know I've got a bad egg. But I also need to figure out how exactly did he do this. So I go to my first page of events. I click on my first instance of PowerShell. And I could decrypt this command line if I wanted to, but I'm not going to take the time to do that right now. Instead, I'm going to drop my chevron down and look at J. Ross and the parent application name, which is a batch file sitting on the desktop. That's sitting right here, as I can see in that command line. I go to my parent application tab, and I see that it's not listed, and it was dropped through explorer.exe. This lets me know that J. Ross is actually a disgruntled Dan, right? He is not someone that I can trust in my environment anymore, because what I'm looking at is him physically dropping a file through Explorer that is brand new. He wrote this. But if this came in through Internet Explorer, Chrome, Outlook, I'd see that here as my origin, and I would be able to click on more to find out details like the IP address that delivered it, or the temporary files where this is stored in Outlook. So I can get right back to my root cause and assess that. But what I need to do now is have an uncomfortable conversation with J. Ross about what he's doing. And I also need to make sure he can't do this again. So I add this to an internal blacklist in my environment, and make sure this file is blocked pre-execution from now on. Then I can actually reach back to his desktop myself and delete that application to ensure it's not even sitting in my environment anymore. Once we've taken care of everything we need to do, we blacklist it, we delete it, we go into Varonis and we make sure that he doesn't have those privileges anymore. We use our other security tools to assess what can I do to make sure this doesn't get this far in the future. If it came in through Chrome, block the IP addresses. Came in through Outlook, plug that into my email filter. Once all that's done and we've handled everything, I can just put this device back online with the flip of a switch. So what we're looking at here is a very advanced attack. It's malwareless. It's utilizing things that live in your environment right now. But streaming prevention is able to assess what is happening and step in to stop the malicious actions before they lead to that breach. Give you full visibility backwards so that you can remediate this entirely. No more need to go through with other tools to utilize and get down to this level of information. No more need to dig through logs. It's all recorded. It's all present for you. And to show you that recording being so in-depth there, what I'm going to do is load a blank investigations page, and I'm going to go ahead and do a search. And what I can see here is actually everything that's ever happened across any device that I've deployed Carbon Black Defense to. We record absolutely everything that occurs. So even if Varonis tells you, hey, you have something trying to access privileged information that they don't need, you can take those keywords and plug them into Carbon Black Defense to find out which computer, which program, which user is originating that traffic, and assess it and go after that directly. So guys, that's really everything I wanted to show you today with Carbon Black Defense. Another thing that we do have here that you can go look at on your own, Carbon Black right here, ngav.carbonblack.com. This is a microsite dedicated to Carbon Black Defense and some of the upcoming changes that we're going to be making as far as enhancing the UI and adding in further remediation features. I encourage you, please go look at this. Read some of the customer testimonial. Look at how streaming prevention works and look at that new UI. And then if you do have any further questions, feel free. I apologize here, guys. Always with the auto updates, right? If you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to myself. It's tmorris@carbonblack.com. I'm going to drop that in the chat real quickly. Reach out to me, ask, and I'll get you guys hooked up with the proper resources at Carbon Black to continue this conversation. So that's really everything that I have for you today. With that, Kevin, I'm going to pass things back over to you.
Well, thank you very much. That was very informative, and thanks so much for showing that to us. And again, you know, Tristan is available, you know, and we obviously here at Champion have access to Tristan and a lot of resources at Carbon Black, and also, you know, Matt and his team over at Varonis to be able to help you. You can call us here at 1-800-771-7000. You can discuss your security strategy with our security experts from Champion that can bring in a lot of different resources and help you develop that security strategy that you're looking for. You can request what Matt was talking about, that free Varonis risk assessment, where they come in and for 30 days they'll monitor your environment, look at all your files, give you a report. It's very in-depth. It helps our customers take that first step into looking at what they can do. And then we do have another webinar that hopefully is valuable to you. It's in my area of expertise, which is around the cloud backup. And we use eVault, which is a Carbonite company, to be able to do that. And we're going to actually discuss about best practices for the cloud and how to do local and cloud backups with using a product like eVault. So as you can see, that's on our Champion SG page under events. You can sign up for that. With that, I don't want to take up more than the hour that we get, but I do want to thank both Matt and Tristan for participating today. I think it was very educational. I think I got a lot out of it, so I hope you did too. With that, I'm going to close down unless there are any questions that you want to post here on the questions section here. I'll leave it open here for a minute. If you go under questions on your interface for Go to My Webinar, type in a question. We'll be more than happy to answer them. Okay, let's see what I have here. I have one question here. So hold on one second, guys. I got, oh, well, this is just someone that actually has the product and it also has eVault. So they're just saying thanks for doing the presentation. Very educational, and anything they can do to help, they'll give a reference for us. So thanks very much. That's really all I got for you guys. Matt, Tristan, thank you, and have a great day.
Thanks so much, everyone.